Alrighty, y'all, welcome back to another endgame lesson, and in this tutorial what I want to do is show you guys how to win with doubled pawns. Now it seems like an easy endgame, but it's actually kind of tricky. There are two really key things that we have to take away. First of all, we want to make sure to avoid a stalemate. With two pawns on the board, it's actually easier for black to cause a stalemate, so you want to be careful not to fall into that trap. And also, there are some other things where we need to make sure that we can't advance our king at certain times, and also we need to gain the opposition. So a lot of subtleties that we're going to cover. So right off the bat in this position, I want to point out that if you just do a natural move right now, like advance your king to c4, then this is going to allow black to essentially move to b6. And now, of course, your king has to retreat. It can't move here. So it's probably going to need to go, maybe back to c3 or somewhere. And already black has a very nice position here, a drawing endgame. So let's just go ahead and delete all those. And that's one thing, like off the bat, you want to make sure to avoid. So instead, the move that you should do here is kind of an unnatural but correct c3. Now with c3, of course, black doesn't have many options. If they just go ahead and say move to c7, then what we can do is, again, we don't want to move up to c4 yet, or else we're going to get into that same pickle. So we'll just say we'll move to d4. And now when black takes the first step and moves to b6, now what we can do is go to c4. And now when we're at c4, protecting these two pawns, of course, now it's black's turn to move. So now they have to kind of back away. So let's say they go to c7. Looks like a decent move. What we can do now is just continue pushing our king forward to help these pawns on their journey to become queens, or one queen, however many we can get. So now black obviously doesn't want to, they want to stop the pawn, so they're going to move over to b7. And now with our king on c5, we can go ahead and start pushing this pawn on b6. So the black king, of course, it's, obviously going to try to prevent this in any way it can. So it's going to move to a6. Now, this is one of the key moments I was talking about that is a little bit different with one pawn versus two pawns. And two pawns, believe it or not, makes it a little bit tricky. The most natural move, to me at least, is taking your king and moving it to c6. Well, moving it to c6 would actually be an automatic stalemate. So this, of course, is a stalemate. The black king can't go anywhere. This is protected by the pawn, and these three squares are protected by the king, and of course a7 is also protected by the pawn. So that's well, what's going on with my king here? All right, so that's one thing that we definitely want to avoid. Let me just delete that move, or else it'll bug me. So instead, what we want to do here is we actually are going to sacrifice this pawn on b6. So we are going to play b7. Now, of course, what the black king is going to do is, since they don't want this to become a queen, they're just going to take king captures b7. And now this is something we learned in the past tutorial. Whenever we take our king, our white king, and move it to b5, look at this. Our kings are one square away, and it's black to move. So by sacrificing our pawn, yes, we lost the pawn, but we gained the opposition with the pawn behind. And as you know, that is the recipe for becoming a queen. So what black is going to do is they'll just play something like a7. We can just play king c6. Again, you guys know this from, I don't know, it was like one of my really early endgame tutorials. And now let's just say black plays a6. At this point, we can just start marching our pawn forward, b5 check. And let's say the king goes back to a7. Then we can play c7, positioning our king to essentially guard these squares so we can start marching our pawn ahead, become a queen. And now what black can do is they can just play a8. And another thing that I want to point out is that if we were to play b6 at this point in time, this would also be a stalemate, as you can see, because the king is protecting these squares. The black king isn't in check. However, the pawn is also protecting this square. So the king has nowhere to move. No legal moves equal stalemate. So that is another thing that we want to avoid. So instead of pushing our pawn right now, what we need to do is we need to essentially get this black king on the other side of this pawn. We need to get him towards the C file. And again, that is because when they're on the A file, it's on the edge of the board, so they can essentially be trapped in there. However, when they're on the C file and they don't have any moves, then they can just move away. Since C, D, E, F, all those files, there's a lot of space over there. So of course, we can probably figure out our best move, and that is instead of pushing the pawn to B6, we're just going to go king to B6. And now black has to move to B8. And what we can do is we can take our king and move it to A6. So again, what we want to do is instead of taking our king on C7 and controlling these three squares, we actually want to go to A7 and control those three squares. So the black king is forced on the other side. So, all right, now this black king, let's just say it goes to C7. And now what we can do is start moving our pawn up, B6 check. And this point, it's pretty easy to see what's going on. The black king is kind of running out of moves. Let's say they go king C8. We can go king A7. And now our pathway is golden. It doesn't really matter what they do. They can even go D7. Why not? B7. I don't know. E6. Run away. And of course, we become a queen. And it's game over from there. So the goal of this is essentially, one, we need to make sure that right off the bat that we don't approach our pawns too early, because if we do, then the black king can come in, and we're going to be taking a look at this in more detail in actually an upcoming video. But essentially, if we approach it too early, then the black king can come in and force our king to move away. We also want to make sure that we don't force the king in any position like this where it's going to cause a stalemate. And again, we didn't really have to worry about this whenever we had a one pawn, but with this pawn behind, we need to take note that it's also controlling some of these escape squares from the king. So always keep that in mind. And also, at the point in time where you can advance your pawn, and a king capturing that pawn is going to allow your king to gain the opposition. You want to do that because that puts you into a winning king and pawn endgame, which you know from the earlier tutorial through the opposition technique, exactly how to win that. So that is the basic idea behind how to win with doubled pawns. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see y'all next video.